From the Oklahoma newsroom, and it's time for Orange Alert, our weekly extended look at Oklahoma State football. I'm Jenni Carlson here in studio with fellow columnist BerryTramel and OSU beat writer Scott Wright. Guys, kind of quiet in Stillwater right now, but we expect eventually to have some news about Oklahoma State's new offensive coordinator. Scott, the fact that Todd Monken, already spoken for, he's remaining in the NFL, where does that leave this search? Do we expect it to go on a while, to have some resolution? What's your best guess on that?
You know, my gut feeling has been from the start that Monken was plan A, and plan B was to go internal and look at either Josh Henson or at Casey Dunn, or a combination of the two. Now, we've discussed before that Mike Gundy doesn't really go for the co-coordinator idea. You know, it really becomes more of a title thing anyway, because there's only one guy calling plays. And so it becomes one of those things where you've got to sort of map things out exactly how you want that to work, so that you don't have too many cooks in the kitchen, so to speak. So I felt that was Plan B behind Monken all along. We'll see if that's the case. There's also an offensive analyst and an offensive quality control coach that need spots that need to be filled. So it could be that Gundy has things in place and he just wants to get everybody in the boat before he maybe makes his Twitter announcement or whatever he's going to do to announce it, like he did last year with Jim Knowles and Greg Richmond when they joined the program, and the other guys that came along at that point. So we'll see how Gundy wants to handle it. He just kind of did it at his own pace and on his own timing last year. You know, there wasn't really any news that leaked out beforehand, so we'll see what happens and where that goes. Still some options out there if he wants to go outside the program. You know, really in this offense, the best option as an offensive coordinator has also been the quarterback's coach, because the quarterback is so central to everything they do. I mean, most offenses it is, but in this offense in particular, it's good to have that communication line be really strong between the guy who's calling plays and the guy who's out there throwing the ball. Well,
and you mentioned Knowles and the fact that it sort of was a bolt out of the blue when he was hired. Mike Yurcich 6 years ago, Barry, really a bolt out of the blue, because we had no idea who he was, and his hiring didn't come till after the February signing day, which, you know, back then they didn't have an early signing day, so they waited until after all of the class was in. At least now they've got a bulk of the class already spoken for, but I still wonder, you know, waiting and weeks going by, does it reduce your pool of potential candidates? Is that at all a concern that Mike Gundy has to think about when hiring this offensive coordinator position, if he's not going to hire from within?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't know what would cause. Now, if you're talking about June or July, somebody doesn't want to leave that late. But you know, if you're still hiring before spring practice, I don't see why. Probably doesn't foster a lot of loyalty in terms of guys wanting to say, well, it's too late in the process. So I think he's going to be able to still hire from the same pool. I tend to think, you know, Gundy, whatever you think of Mike Yurcich, it was a success. He produced great offenses. There's good development from the guys. Mason Rudolph got better and better and better as a quarterback. Taylor Cornelius, a walk-on, became a solid Big 12 quarterback. So I think you have to label Yurcich a success. I tend to think Gundy likes it. You know, it worked last time, why not do it again? So I would not be surprised if we had another stealth candidate. I don't know if we'll go down as deep as Shippensburg. You know, I'm
not sure we knew what Shippensburg was last time.
I'd actually heard of it. I sort of thought I knew what it was, but I don't know if we'll go that deep. But I do think the possibility exists that it will be a guy whose name we say, wait, what? Google, here we come.
Well, and it's interesting, Scott, because, you know, Mike Gundy talked about, even recently at the Liberty Bowl, talked about how getting Mike Yurcich was a lot about continuity. You know, he wanted to keep that guy in that position for a while, but he also wanted to keep the same system. So it's kind of an interesting interplay that you might go outside and bring in a guy with maybe some different ideas, some different thoughts, but yet you still want him to run this same offense. You want him to learn your system. Right. I mean, you got to find the right guy that's willing to do that if you're bringing them in from outside, I would think.
Yeah, ever since you know, Todd Monken and those guys were brought in, they taught them the terminology, they taught them the system, and then they then they got to take it and mold it into what they wanted it to be, add some pieces of their own, do some different things like that. So that's what Mike Gundy wants to do in this instance, and that's why I think that a lot of the names you're hearing are guys that have some sort of connection going back to Oklahoma State. A guy like Bodie Reeder, who was at Eastern Washington, was the quality control coach and helped Mike Yurcich with quarterbacks from 2014 to 2016 in the heart of the Mason Rudolph era. So, that's a guy who popped up and was briefly reported to be on his way to Stillwater until his wife tweeted out fake news, and everybody started digging into that to that national report, and we found that wasn't true. But he's still a guy whose name is on the list. He could be a guy. He's 32. His only experience is at the FCS level right now. So he might not be an offensive coordinator candidate, but he could be a quarterback coach candidate if Mike Gundy wants to stay internal. So there are some guys out there with connections to the program who could be either offensive coordinator candidates or quarterback coach candidates that could come in and really just keep this ship rolling the way that it has been.
Well, obviously, we don't know exactly who will be the quarterback for that new offensive coordinator. Drew Brown's obviously there, Spencer Sanders there, but we do know that they're going to be without Tyron Johnson on in the wide receiver core, Berry. I think there was a thought that he would go to the NFL, and yet he was a guy that when Tylan Wallace became Tylan Wallace towards the end of the year, he was a great safety valve. He'll go to the NFL. How much of a loss do you feel like that is for that Cowboy wide receiver group?
Not very much, and that's 0% indicative of how I feel about Tyron Johnson. But OSU wide receiver is a strength. That's a surplus. That's the last thing you have to worry about. Losing Darian Daniels, losing Brailford, losing those kinds of guys. That's where you think, what are we going to do? Losing a wide receiver. Cowboys are going to be fine. They've got good players returning. They've got prospects coming up. They've been excellent at that position for 6, 7, 8, 10 years. Last worry of Mike Gundy is what are we going to do at wide receiver. With that said, Tyron Johnson's a good player. I think he's a really good player. People say he was a disappointment. I didn't think so. What happened in this past, he played with James Washington for 2 years, or he played with him for 1 year in 17. This year, Tylan Wallace emerged as a Biletnikoff Award winner. They can't have 2 Biletnikoff finalists, for crying out loud. So, I mean, I thought Tyron Johnson was a very good player, really helped that OSU offense, but they're going to be able to replace him.
Yeah, and it looks like you mentioned his skill. I think he's going to be a pretty good NFL type of wide receiver. But Scott, I mean, Barry's right. It sounds like, at least on the offensive side, well, there is that question of who is your starting quarterback. When you look at the guys they bring back at wide receiver, the fact that they got a great recruit in the recruiting class coming in, and running back, they seem like, with the exception of quarterback, they have to like where their offense is.
They've got to be really excited about the situation. Until Tyron Johnson made his announcement, it was they needed a quarterback and they needed a right guard, and that was it. Now they do need to fill that one spot at receiver on the outside, and they've got about 5 guys in line ready to take that opportunity. And it's some different type of guys than Tyron Johnson. It's some big guys, some guys with some height, 6'4", 6'5", 6'6", who could add a new dynamic to the offense as well. But they're just looking for their trigger man now, and that's going to be, it started in December through bowl practice when they gave Taylor Cornelius a little bit of rest early in that period. Let Spencer Sanders and Drew Brown go at it with the first team offense or the majority of the first team offense and get that quarterback battle started. We'll see it go into spring and then obviously through the summer and into August. I think that it'll be at least mid-August before we know who the guy is going to be in that situation. So it's going to be an interesting battle to watch, being that it is a redshirt freshman and a fifth-year senior that are going to be going at it. Similar guys that have similar skill sets, and it's going to make the battle really interesting. But like you said, Jenny, with all the talent that they've got around them, they're going to have every opportunity to succeed in this offense, whoever it ends up being.
Well, as we talk about needs, let's talk about the recruiting class, which at this point they keep adding a piece here and there. One spot left, Scott? Is that where where they are right now?
Yeah, they are. We walked out of the press conference on signing day Oklahoma State had signed 19 players, plus you have Drew Brown and Kima Sivaran, grad transfers from the middle of last summer, who count toward this class, so that took up a couple of more spots. But since then, and at that point, fans were really frustrated because it was a bunch of 3 stars and that whole thing. But since then, later that day, they added Langston Anderson, a 4-star wide receiver. In the last week, they've added a transfer in Israel Antwine, who they feel really confident about his ability to get a waiver from the NCAA to become eligible immediately, even though it's a typical transfer. He was a true freshman at Colorado, had originally been committed to Oklahoma State for a while, and then flipped right before signing day. Played as a true freshman on the defensive line at Colorado, has a chance to contribute right away if he gets that waiver to play in this fall. And then DeAndre Glass, the 4-star running back who was being recruited by Alabama and Georgia and Miami and Texas, picks Oklahoma State, puts on that Pistol Pete hat during the Blue-Gray All-American game the other day on ESPN3, and was adds even more depth to a really talented running back group that they've already got. Even though they lost Justice Hill and J.D. King, they've replenished that group really well, and so they've got 5 guys on scholarship now that they feel really confident in. So now they do, they've got that 1 spot left. Sony Fonua is the only guy right now that they're targeting. As far as he's at least the top of the list. They've got other guys in mind, but defensive end out of Mesa Community College in Arizona, a guy that they think could come in as a 6'4", 265-pound defensive end and be able to help them right away at a spot where they lost 6 guys basically across the defensive front.
Well, something we haven't talked about with OSU in terms of new guys is grad transfers coming off the famous transfer portal, Barry, which, I mean, OSU had several guys in the portal heading out, but at this point, they may not get any, which is, for OSU, Mike Gundy, that's kind of a rarity.
Yeah, Mike's done well in the grad transfer, not necessarily the last year or two, but before that, and it's really instructive looking at the OSU grad transfer history, because it shows you it's not automatic home runs. Yeah. Tyler Patman from Kansas was very good. The linebacker from Michigan, Furman. Am I right about the name? Josh Furman?
Yeah.
Josh Furman, very solid addition to that OSU defense. But then the last couple of years, Adrian Baker, I think his name was, the Clemson guy, didn't really work out. You had the guy from Texas A&M this year who really didn't play much until the Liberty Bowl and helped out a lot. But sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So, it's not something you can really count on, I don't think. If it happens, great. If it doesn't, hopefully you weren't counting on it to start with.
Yeah, I think OSU would say they've gotten way more positives out of the grad transfer world than not. But we'll see if that 1 spot they find somebody they like, or if they're going with a junior college or a high school guy. Only 1 spot to really account for come signing day in February. But obviously a big hire before that with the offensive coordinator spot. Be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com every day in the Oklahoman.